What are you doing?
Stacking sets.
Hi all, welcome to Windshield time. It is Day and Arry. How are you doing? Today is Wednesday, August 26th, and it's about 10:30 p.m. Show number 103, and this is COVID-19 pandemic show number 23. So that means 23 weeks that we've been in
quarantine
pandemic situation.
And
Anyway.
for those of you that are joining in, Windshield Time is a podcast and a YouTube show that teaches people about money and Bitcoin. So we're here to make it simple, break it down, make it really educational and fun-formational for you.
Awesome. All right, so this is going to be another experimental show. As a preview, we're going to play the interview with Mueller Eberstein.
Yes, Mr. Mueller Eberstein. He's an author. He's I think ex-engineer,
Investor, connector, teacher. So I got that from his Twitter profile.
Oh, great, even better.
And his Twitter profile is at Mark M. Eberstein. It should show up somewhere right around here. I am Luggage Donkey on Twitter. Thanks again for joining us.
And I'm Arry in Seattle.
Yeah. Okay, we don't give financial advice, but we'd like to do a little bit called Satoshi math.
Hey, so what's the price of Bitcoin at?
So it's at approximately $11,400.
Holding.
And then we're trying to make this super crazy fast. So when you do the math, you get, just do it.
All right, so Satoshi math helps you figure out the number of Satoshis that are in $1. Remember, there are 100 pennies in every $1 US. There are 100 million Satoshis in every 1 Bitcoin. So to figure out the number of Satoshis that are in the number in $1, you take $1, you need to divide it by 0.0001140, and you get, drum roll,
approximately 8,800 sats per dirty US fiat dollar.
There you go. That's how you figure out the number of Satoshis in every $1.
The other little bit of interesting news is that tomorrow morning, Fed Chair Jerome Powell, is going to be testifying on regarding new monetary-ish, policy-ish kind of stuff going on. So everybody is paying attention to that because he's going to be addressing the whole inflation. We haven't been having enough inflation issue. So that should move the markets a lot. Yeah.
Do you know what time it's at?
So it's around 6 a.m. Pacific. Yeah, so 9 a.m. on the West Coast.
By the time we wake up, then
It'll all be playing out.
We'll know what's going on.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right, cool.
Just to make sure we don't give financial advice, but yeah, we do talk about money and Bitcoin a lot on this show. And so just to dive into a little bit of our normal stuff. So I'm wearing a Bitcoin t-shirt, and it's from Bitcoin Magazine. I think the logo's right there, Bitcoin Magazine. And I do have a special hat on too, but I don't really feel like calling it out. And we have kind of a terrible lighting situation here, but just making do with what we have. And just a quick, how are you doing?
Great. Our childcare solution has arrived, and it's much better than before.
Very nice. Yes, it is.
Yes, nanny.
Is.
We have a nanny now.
All right. So Mark Mueller Eberstein again, a friend of the podcast, friend in real life, world traveler, author, investor, connector, teacher, great Twitter feed.
Good guy.
And good dude. Yes, exactly. And so the experiment that we're running is that this show that we're about to play, the podcast recording, is from February 27th. And basically I'm going to shove that into a YouTube show. So I'm going to take the audio feed, make a YouTube show, and then rip the audio and publish that as a podcast. So going all the way around circle just to end up as a podcast again anyway.
And we'll have some nice pretty pictures to show of Mark or something like that. We'll
I'm gonna do a slideshow inside the video feed, but that's all we have. So I don't know. It could be called a slow news week, but I mean, Bitcoin's still hanging out well above $10,000 per Bitcoin. You know, and that always feels nice. And summer's coming to an end. September, Labor Day is coming up.
Time for some barbecue.
Summer's coming to an end here real soon, end of August, and we're going to hit Labor Day. And so thanks again for joining us on Windshield Time. Stay tuned for the Mueller Eberstein interview from February 27th. Thank you for the time. Thank you to the WTIA for the continued sponsorship.
Yes, thank you to the WTIA, and thank you for being with us. Thank you for spending your last... Oops. Thank you for spending time with us. We wouldn't be here without you, and we really appreciate any feedback you can send to us. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share. Together we rise.
Be nice, y'all.
Bye.
All right. Oh, that was terrible. Pleasantly surprised. I haven't really gotten much feedback, but maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised at like, oh wow, it's like, you know, what I experienced in real life is now, you know, coming off the radio, and it's like, wow, it's like NPR. Do you listen to NPR?
I do listen to NPR, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
mostly Freakonomics, Marketplace.
Oh, yeah. That's a lot of my favorite stuff too. Yeah.
Well, welcome Mark Mueller Eberstein to the Windshield Studio podcast.
Windshield Time
Studio podcast.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Seriously, it's really, really a pleasure to have you here.
Every day, it's a pleasure to be here.
This is actually his third appearance. Did you realize that?
Ooh, was it? Oh,
'cause
yeah,
the Five
Ventures.
Ventures, and then we had the micro interviews at the WTI Happy Hour, and then now with the full length show here.
And for the record, if Lawrence is listening, it is Mark Mueller Eberstein.
Oh man,
That's one of the best
Just called him
pronunciation
out.
I've heard for a long time, Arry.
Really?
Thank you
And I'm
so
not
much.
even German.
No. I hardly could tell.
Okay, so we had lunch. We did our normal routine, and so got a nice lunch. Got a coffee. I have my coffee beverage as well.
Mark has his coffee beverage too.
And so I wanted to start in with the Tesla. So you mentioned how you put our podcast on. Thank you very much, and you were listening on the way over. And so the Tesla, how often do you use the autopilot, and which model do you have?
Yeah,
and all
why
that?
do you use autopilot? Aren't you afraid of like dying?
Well, let me answer that one first, because like a fellow Tesla owner at one point said it's a great. The autopilot is really great as long as you don't forget that the car tries to kill you from time to time. So you need to stay vigilant. So with that in mind, I have a Tesla X for a little bit over 2 years now. And growing up in Germany, I am a car guy. So one of my first jobs was actually working at Daimler-Benz in the global headquarters for spare part marketing. That's how I started. So cars were something that is, it's nearly genetic.
It's in your blood.
And I could never imagine to not drive a BMW or Mercedes or an Audi until I really had this Tesla, and I've been very, very pleasantly surprised. I mean, of course, there's tons of things I could complain about, but it's becoming super clear that for reliable transportation, electric vehicles are just so much easier. You plug them in and they just work. Reminds me, like when I was working at Microsoft, the Microsoft Windows phones were extremely powerful, but you needed to understand exactly what kind of WAP protocol you had so you can connect it to Wi-Fi. And we had lots and lots of conversations, years over these phones until I had an iPhone, and it just worked, and I didn't have to talk about a cell phone anymore. So it's like with the Tesla, it just drives. You unplug it in the morning, you drive it all day, and the autopilot. Partly I selected it because I was spending a lot of time traveling worldwide and was using like ride-sharing applications a lot. So it was very easy to sit in the car, to have somebody drive you. It's quite relaxing, especially like in city traffic. So when I ordered the Tesla, I ordered it with autopilot. And to switch it on is basically like on the left hand of your steering column, you have like this little thing how you switch on maybe cruise control, but it's automatically switching on distance, staying in the lane, and then depending how you configured it, it's like staying in the faster lane, picking the faster lane, doing all of these things automatic, and it's really starting to be very, very relaxing. partly because people don't cut in front of you anymore. They just cut in front of the autopilot, and the autopilot accelerates or decelerates accordingly. And it's a much, much more stress-free driving than it was before.
Yeah.
So do you like read a book while driving?
Or do you tweet?
What do you like? Aren't you like?
Of course,
how-
absolutely not. That wouldn't be legal.
So you
That's right.
so you just sit there and it drives you.
Yeah, it's you look outside, you make sure you still have the steering wheel needs to feel that you're actually touching it. So
I was just
it's
gonna ask that, yeah.
so there's some kind of mechanism built in that makes sure like if you haven't held the steering wheel hard enough, then it reminds you with the blinking light and said, "Hey, remember, you need to actually pay attention." But it's mostly the car driving itself, and you have more attention to spend on Windshield podcast, for example.
So then the car automatically knows where to go to. So you put in like the destination and the car figures out the route and drives you semi-safely there with your basic attention alerts going off every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. You basically, when I came today, I had your address was on the calendar invite, and my phone is syncing to the Tesla. So the car actually already knew where it needed to go. So I just needed to confirm it.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And then the navigation system shows up, and then the moment you hit the highway, the car drives itself from on-ramp to off-ramp.
And then you're looking out the window and admiring the beautiful views we have here in the Pacific Northwest.
As far as it is legal, yes, I do that.
So then let's see here. So is it I believe they passed a law to where you can't have a mechanically disengaged like front steering any longer. Like it has to be mechanically connected, because I think for a while it was disconnected and it was causing issues, of course, if you don't have power, and then it's just electronic steering, then you can't like move the car around, which cause safety issues.
I think modern cars today are steering by wire or fly by wires. They're not mechanically connected anymore.
Oh, really? Huh. So, but then like if you try to move the steering wheel on autopilot, what happens?
Oh, I take over right away. So if I decide to move the steering wheel, I'm in control. If I brake, I'm in control. If I accelerate, I'm in control as well.
Oh, okay. So it's like an advanced form of cruise control.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Oh, interesting. Very, very cool. Yeah. To this date, I have yet to experience autopilot in a Tesla, and so I'm extremely curious about it.
Maybe we can do it sometime in the next week or so.
A field trip
without the children.
No children. Yeah.
No children. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter all the time, and so I happen to be following a bunch of car culture stuff, a lot of Tesla stuff.
Yeah.
And they post a lot of videos, a lot of photos. It's extremely rabid culture, the Tesla crowd, just like the Bitcoin and the crypto crowd. So
Maybe
it fits
that's
well.
why it feels so comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, did you have something you wanted to start off on, or I got some
I don't know. So the last you were listening to the podcast episode around Pathwise Leadership on the way here, so maybe we can start with that.
Oh yeah, great idea.
So Mark Mueller Eberstein, you went through Pathwise as well. What was your experience, and how did you find out about it?
Oh, that's a long story. I think that's probably the whole story is probably longer than the whole episode here. But I left Microsoft in 2010 and founded a consulting business, trying to figure out what to do and what to focus on. And I had a mentor of mine ask me to meet with somebody who had just similar situation, like trying to figure out what to do with his life. So I met him and tried to coach him, but he asked so many really good questions that I felt I got more out of it than I was giving back. So I said, hey, this was a great conversation. How do you know? He said, well, I have joined this class called Pathwise Leadership. And that's where we are basically suspending attention and figuring out what's happening with the other person. So that sounds exciting. And then he also explained that a lot of top executives are part of it. And hey, I needed to be part of that and as well. So that really was the sales argument, I think, that made me meet Chet first.
Okay.
And I joined the group and found it the longer the more I learned, the more I learned about myself.
Yeah.
And the more helpful I found it in not only professionally, but in all kind of relationships.
Yeah, that's been a running theme. It's not just the professional, and that's kind of like the in, but then in all aspects of your awake time, it's been a massive help to me, in the journey with Pathwise here, with Arry.
And it's interesting if you realize you meet somebody and you have this shared experience and vocabulary that Pathwise brings, it's much easier to have difficult conversations that you otherwise probably would avoid, and work through issues that I would say without Pathwise you might have not even been aware of the issues, but by both knowing that you have a similar understanding, similar vocabulary, you can bring it up, you can talk relatively open about it, and then put it behind you and move productively forward.
Absolutely. So then what was the are we closing this out now? This okay. Well, so then Pathwise, you said a moment ago that if it were not for Pathwise, you may not have come across blockchain or Bitcoin. What's the story behind that?
That's interesting. It was really on my drive here when I was listening to your podcast that I thought, well, we're doing a Bitcoin and blockchain podcast, and I was listening to the Pathwise episode. So I was thinking, well, what would have happened if I wouldn't have taken this class? And I mean, I worked in the corporate world for most of my career until about 10 years ago. And I think through Pathwise, I realized that I should listen more to myself and spend more time on things that are interesting to me instead of impressing others. So most of my career, I was very at the cutting edge of technology, but usually far too early. I was a product manager for PCs in Germany in the mid-90s, and I connected a tiny little computer to a Nokia phone and told people you can do internet while you're mobile. And people would say, A, why would I need internet? And B, why would I do it mobile? So through most of my career, I was like at this. I saw these things, but I couldn't really do anything about it. And then in the earlier part of the 10s, like 2011, 2012, I had followed this Bitcoin thing. I was always interested in economics and business application of technology. And when the opportunity arose that I could actually take time off and spend some research time on this new blockchain type, I said, I organized it. I left my other businesses on autopilot and went to use a research institute in Shenzhen at that time. And figured out what this blockchain thing is about. And similar thing, I had always liked startups and entrepreneurs. So I had joined angel groups about the same time. And then applying the best practices of angel investment into the blockchain space, you saw projects at the right teams, at the right thing, that most probably had a lot more likelihood of success. Being part of the ecosystems, talking to people that are much smarter than me and had the patience of explaining it to me. So until I finally got it, you start investing in those spaces as well.
Outstanding. So would you be interested in sharing your, I guess, first exposure to Bitcoin specifically?
I love to. I actually wrote about it in the book I wrote about blockchain in 2018.
Oh yeah.
That's and the trust technology, and was written for my traditional investor friends that did not know about blockchain. So how did I get started? I had followed this Bitcoin thing for a while and this blockchain and trying to figure out what it is. And then I was invited to do a closing keynote at the Chinese Cloud Computing Congress in Beijing, like small event, like 10,000 people or something. So, and apparently I talked about how important the cloud is for unlocking technology capabilities for companies. But afterwards, I got approached and said, well, we have this new research institute in Shenzhen and we're looking for researchers that have interesting questions. So we can work with them in figuring out what does it mean. And I said, well, I've visited China many times. I'd never really lived there. So this is a time for as an expat for a couple of months to basically get a different life experience. And that's exactly why I said, well, why not? So we organized it accordingly. I went down there. And I was really coming more with the approach of blockchain, not Bitcoin at that time, which wasn't really cool. It became like the cool thing for enterprises a couple of years later.
Right.
But the Belt and Road Initiative in China just started, and they started to see what they could do with customs, for example, and optimizing international goods transfers and collaboration. And I found it quite interesting. So I started to look into this. But living in Shenzhen, I realized relatively quickly that it's also the technology capital, basically worldwide. Of everything is getting built there, from drones to iPhones. But also a lot of the Bitcoin mining hardware was done there. A lot of the development was done there. Tencent, the company that is doing WeChat, also has a blockchain practice. It's getting their Chinese banks on blockchain infrastructure. They have their own consulting practice. So I met all of these people that were already focusing on it. And they introduced me to other folks that were basically telling me that the People Bank of China was already working on cryptocurrencies in 2015.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
So there was at least 3 projects going on at that time. So it was really, really interesting. And a couple of them were, today you would call them Bitcoin maximalists. So they explained to me why Bitcoin is really important. And then, how the world sometimes comes together. I was in Beijing to have lunch with an old Microsoft friend, the former general counsel of Microsoft China, David Ben-Kay. And I tried to explain to him over Italian lunch at the art district of Beijing why Bitcoin is really interesting. And he said, yeah, Bitcoin is cool, but have you heard about smart contracts? I'm like, what the heck is that? So he told me that he had left Microsoft, and as an attorney, he was just helping this Canadian-Russian kid to put a foundation together in Switzerland called the Ethereum Foundation.
Oh my God.
Oh, man.
So, that's how I started to look into Ethereum.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Did you participate in the Ethereum ICO?
I was too late for the ICO,
Oh,
but
man.
as I said, as an angel investor, you write little checks for things you believe in. So we did okay.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Good time to get in.
Yeah. And a couple of years forward, that's why what I like to do is I try to give back. I like to connect people. I like to see what's possible. I did a blockchain event in California, in Santa Clara, for enterprises and helped moderating it. And afterwards, somebody came to me and said, hey, this was great. Have you ever been in Davos? And I said, yes. I think we drove by there one time when I was a child in Switzerland for skiing.
Yeah.
But no, during the World Economic Forum. I said, well, that's interesting. No, not yet. So they asked me to show up and see if I can help with some of the side events that are happening there. So my first reaction was, well, maybe. Why not? So I have a good friend of mine. We are working in the blockchain space together. He's also here from Seattle. And we share a lot of the investment due diligence together. So I asked, we had lunch and I said, hey, Al, what do you think? And he said, hey, that sounds like fun. Let's go together. So we figured out, I said, well, instead of, let's make this more like a camping trip. And after I figured out the basics, I reached out to David Ben-Kay again. And I said, hey, David, you helped me to understand what Ethereum is. Can I give back and take you with us to Davos? Seems to be fun. We're going to have a Airbnb and spend some time there. And he likes, Mark, Davos in the winter, it's cold. I like it to live in the tropics now. Not really. But there's a couple of really smart young people building cool things. You remember this Vitalik guy in the Ethereum? There's some other cool people. Can you take them? And I said, well, if you say they're cool people, why not? I took the 2 founders, Danny and Zach, from that became now PundiX. So we went together 3.5 years ago, and they built I think they're now in 28 countries. But at that time it was 2 guys trying with the dream of trying to build something. So
Wow.
Yeah, you got a rich history there. I only started in late 2015.
Yeah.
And so I still feel like I'm, very, very new and still learning, every day.
Yeah.
And so Huh.
Oh, that's for sure. That's the one thing
Right.
when somebody introduces themselves or even me as a blockchain expert, I get like the shivers. I'm like, this is no.
Yeah.
I'll do this for long enough, and I know so many smart people, and we are all learning. There's so much happening. I've never seen anything
Things are
moving this
changing
quickly.
too, like week after
Absolutely.
week, you know.
Oh,
It's-
yeah,
It's
no.
so different.
I feel like if I'm not learning 24 hours a day, I'm not even having a chance to stay on top of things. But
yeah.
Hey, so let's okay, so you're on Twitter and you're at Mark M. Eberstein. And so on your profile you have connector, investor, teacher, business impact of information technology, Internet of Things, cloud, blockchain, DeLorean, Alliance Angels, and a TEDx that you did, I guess, locally here.
Yeah.
That was a terrific little talk that you gave. So let's pick one of these.
Oh, I love them all.
we could
I
pick
I don't know,
love them all.
DeLorean.
DeLorean.
Are we going
Oh,
back
yeah.
to the future?
Oh,
Back to the
I
future.
wish. I mean, we always wish we had invested more, right? In the things that worked out and less in the things that didn't work out.
yeah.
That's a legendary car to car fanatics, and so so you have an interest in it, and then I'm assuming you have one.
I do. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What makes you so fascinated about DeLoreans?
As I said earlier, I think the cars apparently have something going on, and I always liked the car. I liked the movies. I like this concept of figuring out how time works and physics in general. And the DeLorean DMC 12 is a very classic car. I mean, it's the iconic, the wing doors that go open, the movie Back to the Future. I mean, probably a lot of people have seen it there.
Oh yeah.
But same thing, a friend of mine had a startup here in the Seattle area, and very smart marketing guy as well. He realized that I think it was for the celebration for the Back to the Future came up like the year I think they traveled in, right?
Yeah.
So, and he had a hacker community. He built Hexdar.io. And so they bought one on eBay and called it Hack to the Future. So they shipped it around the US, and people were building weird things into it. So if you search on YouTube for DeLorean flamethrower, you can see the car that is actually now in my garage.
What?
Throwing flames. But because people actually built it in. They built the switches in and the tanks for the lighter fluid. So they modified that car quite a bit. But the first hackathon was here in Seattle, and I took some pictures with it, and I'm like, hey, that's cool. And then the year went by. It was in January. So the year went by. The marketing was over. And like typical startups, they needed cash. So what do? Well, we don't really need the DeLorean, and it had a lot of mechanical issues as well. So he said, well, we need to sell it. I said, well, Adam, why don't we talk? Apparently I might want one. And he said, no, you're a very good friend. I'm not selling you this car that's falling apart all the time. So I was bugging him long enough, and then the only car repair shop for DeLoreans north of California was at that time in Bellevue. Toby Peterson runs it. He's like a former Boeing mechanic, and he has these cars since the 80s. He loves them. So we went there and basically said, okay, Toby, in case I would buy this car, what's the list of stuff that needs to be done?
Yeah.
So he came up with this big, long list of the essentials. And so I know exactly what I was getting into. So I bought the car, and Toby started to fix stuff.
Yeah.
And now I have a DeLorean, and it's really good shape.
So it's street legal, street drivable, everything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow,
It's
okay.
I take it to car shows on a regular basis
Oh,
when I have
man,
time and I'm in
that's so
town.
awesome.
It's
I gotta see it now.
so much fun. It's so much fun.
Guess now you're doing a
Man.
trip out east.
It's like a dream come true.
No, I mean, it's one of those things that make people smile. So wherever you are, people come and they smile. And it's for me when I walk into the garage in the morning and I'll see it there. I'm like, hey, I got to smile. That's cool.
Hello, DeLorean.
Totally.
Do you have a name for it? You got like, hey, Diane, or
No.
Like,
It
they
has.
names
Of
cars.
course, it has a vanity plate, right?
oh,
To future.
to
So-
future.
So
Well, full disclosure. So, I mean, so you are German. You moved here, I think you said, in like 2001?
into the U.S. the winter
Yeah.
of 98, 99 to
Oh, okay.
Boise, Idaho.
Ooh, why?
Uh-huh.
Because that's where Hewlett Packard's headquarter for the printing business was.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was
That's
managing their global enterprise printing solutions business.
Oh, nice.
Idaho.
Oh,
eh?
yeah, Idaho,
Oh.
yeah, the famous potatoes, and it's on their license plate. And
Full
I tried, yeah.
full disclosure, I mean, so I do have a German vehicle. It's also semi-iconic.
Oh.
So it was in the Transporter, so Jason Stratham's 7 series.
Ooh, okay.
So then, and then also it was a Bond car, and so I got a 740i. And so, I mean, it's not really...
That's a 2000 or...
2001.
2001.
Yeah,
okay,
it's
yeah,
the
that's
last
great.
production year of that
before the
exact
Bengal
body
butt came
style.
up. Yes,
Yeah, exactly,
Mhm.
exactly.
And they pulled it all completely apart and built it all from the
Well,
ground.
I had some help. I had some
with
help from
with a dear
Wow.
friend,
BMW
EJ.
master.
Yeah.
Mm.
Built the entire thing. So like they took 2 cars, one was black and one was all tan interior, and then nowadays has a black and tan interior. Like they picked and chose different parts out of it.
But what I love about it, so it's a 2001,
Yeah.
now it's 2020,
Crazy.
but you get inside the car and it is just so well designed. I mean, BMW had been making cars for decades and decades, or like 100 years before that came out. But the fact that that design is just so timeless, you know, and all the kind of ergonomic features that you see in modern cars, it's already there in 2001 in that car.
Best seat warmers ever.
Best seat warmers ever, exactly.
Yeah.
But you know, I just can't like stand the idea of giving up that car. And so even though I want to drive it less because of the wear and tear, you know, I want to do what I can to control the service and maintenance costs, but be able to keep the car for hopefully forever.
Yeah. No, it's if there was also BMW did these shorts called, I think the Follow, I think.
Oh yeah. I love those.
Yes. And I think there's the one with that year, I think as well.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
at
That's
least
right.
that body
It's packed
style.
away someplace. But
Yes.
yeah, well, a lot of
Probably
people
can
sit
still
down and
find
watch
them on
Arry.
YouTube somewhere. So, but
Yeah,
yes.
that too. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the cloud world now, so it's all there.
Yeah. Totally.
No, but
Any
those are
other-
great cars.
Any
yes.
other questions about cars, Arry? I know you love cars. And you want us to have more cars in our household.
They would like more and more of the oldest cars you can find. If it was born in the 80s or 90s, even better. Yay.
Were great years.
Yes.
The
great
80s
years.
were great years. Yes.
Especially for cars.
And music.
Oh, yeah. Music,
Fashion.
music.
Don't forget the fashion.
Oh, God, the fashion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Turquoise and pink shirts. I mean, come on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tight rolls.
So then you landed in Boise, and then eventually you made your way to Seattle and Microsoft.
Yeah, Microsoft headhunted me in 2001.
Okay.
I came
So
over
you were there
here.
for about 10 years.
I was at Microsoft for 10 years. Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yeah, nearly
yeah.
10 years, yes.
Okay. Was that the Ballmer era or the Gates and Ballmer era?
No, Gates had just, Bellmer had taken over as the CEO.
Yeah.
Gates
Okay.
was still, of course, very, very present.
Yeah.
And
Hey, you started
yeah.
around when I started.
oh.
2002 is when I started at Microsoft. And the stock price wasn't that great.
No. I turned HP shares into Microsoft shares, or the options
No.
at least at that time.
And I finally left in like 2005, and I got rid of all my shares. And now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I kept them all these
The
years.
good stocks you want to keep forever, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. No, they did. Surprising. I mean, between Satya and Amy Hood, and they did a really, really good job, I think, over the last years.
But hey, so did you hear the theory on Pathwise Leadership and Satya? What do you think? Like the idea that Pathwise had already been priming the leadership for 10 years at least before Satya took power, and then he came in with this whole, growth mindset, mindfulness.
I mean, I have no idea if it's true or not, but I like it. It's a good story.
That's my theory.
No,
Yeah.
no. And it has been a good company. I mean, I've worked there for nearly 10 years. I've met some really, really interesting people. I've learned so much during those years. And one of the reasons why I took the job of Microsoft was doing the interviews in 2001. Even the mid-level managers, they asked me questions that were harder, that my top executives at HP didn't ask me. So I said, well, if I want to learn something, this is probably the place I want to be.
Yeah.
They were pretty legendary for a long while for the gauntlet of interviewing that you had to get through. And especially, I think, devs had a hard time, with very, very, very difficult tests.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's for sure. But it was also, I think, some of this. I was in this interesting role between technology, business, legal. So this just after the consent decree, and working very closely with the top executives. And one of the things they tested for is, can you say I don't know? And I realized it only afterwards, because there was at one point in time I got all these technical questions and I'm like, I don't know. But it was basically part of the test was to figuring out, if somebody asks you something that you don't know, don't make something up.
Yeah,
And
seriously.
then go figure out what's going on, what's really going on.
Right,
And that
right.
that helped quite a bit. And I had a good time. Interesting people,
Wow.
interesting experiences, a lot of good stories.
Mostly in Redmond?
I mean, I worked all the time in Redmond, yes, and the
Yeah.
main campus. I know they tore the buildings down. Most of the buildings I've worked.
That's right. They're refreshing a lot of the buildings on campus now.
Really?
Building 27, Building 9, Building 8. I mean,
there,
all
been
of the things
there.
are not there anymore.
31, 34.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Yeah.
one
You
big.
didn't know about that?
Mhm.
I haven't been on campus
Yeah.
in so long.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
like they're all gone. It's like one big construction site now.
Really?
It's,
Interesting.
Yeah, no, it's.
Memories.
But I traveled a lot. I mean, as I said, one of the things we did was developing a program. Like, Microsoft was filing 400 patents a year,
Oh,
and
right,
we
yeah.
were in this play game of cards with IBM, who had like 5,000 a year. So we're trying to figure out what do we do,
Yeah.
and we developed basically an education program for telling engineers how easy it is to file patents. And then we traveled around the world, literally in the beginning, got the engineers in the cafeteria, talked to them for 90 minutes and told them, this is what it is. And by the way, if you file a patent, there's also a financial reward for you. And we got the company from 400 to 5,000 patent filings a year. And it was, I mean, that's why I went to like Hyderabad and Beijing and Vetbeck in Denmark.
Oh, wow.
And it was interesting.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, so you've traveled quite a bit. You're not from the United States originally too. And you continue to travel quite a bit.
Yeah.
Do you have any like observations that you can share around what the American viewpoint might be versus the rest of the world? Like some funny or maybe just like interesting observations that you can share to someone who hasn't been traveling for quite at least a couple of years now.
I'm not even sure where to start. I think
Yeah.
one thing I realized, like even while I was at Microsoft, is if you are on campus for a while, you start to get a tunnel vision. So you don't see what's happening around you.
Right.
Like the whole smartphone thing. I was in Japan. You go on a subway in Japan, and everybody had their phones, and they do cool things on it. And when you come back to the US, it was flip phones. So, so this whole concept of your phone can do more than just being a phone or a texting thing was already for years in countries like Japan completely prevalent. And if you actually stepped into a subway, you couldn't miss it. But if you're just being on the Microsoft campus in Redmond, you wouldn't have never even thought about it. And of course, like, so cultural awareness is really important. I mean, like we talked about going back to cars, one of the reasons why German cars are as great as they are, have had, at least for a long time, horrible cup holders, because driving in Germany is very, very different. Like we talked about cruise control. The concept of cruise control or a cup holder is for a German driver and therefore a German engineer completely foreign. You drive actively, so you have both hands on your steering wheel, and sometimes you switch the gear. You look at all the mirrors all the time. You're changing speed all the time. There is no time for having a coffee or I mean, even cruise control, you switch it on, but like 30 seconds later you need to change speed anyway. So if you're in a specific culture, you live and you think in that culture. The moment you're stepping out and you're aware, you take some time to observe what's happening, you see so many interesting perspectives that can help and understanding that world better, but then also your own world, and you see opportunities that might other people don't see or dangers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love one of my so I'll give you two of my favorite jokes about BMWs right now. I love these jokes. So one is let's see, if it doesn't have a broken cup holder, it's not a real BMW. And the other is about let's see, what's the difference between porcupines and BMWs? So on a BMW, the pricks are on the inside. And I love that because you can interchange BMW with Porsche and Mercedes-Benz, any of those cars, so.
And you said you're having a BMW, right? You have
Yes,
a
I do.
yeah, okay,
Yes, I
good.
do. Well, I always imagine that if I'm in a hurry in that car, then I'm automatically being cursed, by, drivers around me. But, if I was in a different car doing the same driving behavior, maybe, no second thought would be given, towards me, that kind of thing.
And maybe we drive differently. I mean, we have a BMW as well, and it's different how people treat you on the road, or maybe it's about the way you're driving as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of that subconscious stuff. That, yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you've talked about perspectives around the world, and traveling is good for your own soul, and also for your own creativity, as a way to put it. But what about within the United States? So you landed in Idaho, and here you are, in the Pacific Northwest. Observations.
Well, first, Idaho is like the most cultural advanced city probably in Idaho. Boise.
Really?
In Idaho, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's people say, well, it's the only city between Salt Lake City and Portland. So if they have a concert on the weekend in Portland and the next weekend in Utah and Salt Lake City, you usually have like a midweek stop in Boise. So there's actually some stuff going on. They have a great Shakespeare festival in the summer, so I really enjoyed that. The outdoors are fantastic. But I'm born and raised in Germany, so blonde blue eyes. I usually said as long as I didn't open my mouth, I fit right in. Nobody would notice that I'm foreign.
Hey boy,
but the accent then gave it away.
You don't talk right, boy.
Yeah. So, no, it's I mean, there's definitely differences in different places, but you find, I mean, the one thing people often ask me, which place in your travels did you like best? And I said, well, there's definitely places I don't want to live forever, but if you spend some time, you get to know people, you look around a little bit, there's so many interesting things to discover. I mean, last year was the first time in my life I was in Inner Mongolia, which is part of China, but it's like northern China. Like, and they, on one side, I mean, like the landscape looks like Genghis Khan runs through it, but you have also literally thousands of electric windmills that are generating power there.
Very cool.
How fast things can happen. So we saw the new data center for Apple that is built there, and I said, well, from the decision to build this data center to being live is 12 months. So in other places of the world, it might take 3, 4, 5 years until you have something built. So it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, anywhere from if it's look in Peru or like even as I said, different areas of the U.S., you find a lot of hidden treasures. I think if you spend the time, if you take the time to smell the roses.
Take the time to smell the roses. Yeah.
So speaking of renewable energy and windmills and that sort of thing, so what is your I guess conversation to people who have the belief that blockchains and Bitcoin chew up a crazy amount of energy?
Yeah.
That misconception.
Or
well, I mean, it does. First of all, blockchain and Bitcoin two different things. But Bitcoin is the only way of turning energy into money, into value. So everything else, you can create energy, but you have to transport it somewhere, and then somebody else does something with it. And in a lot of parts of the world, the creation of energy is actually relatively simple. You put a dam in there, you put some solar cells out there, but then what do you do with that energy? And how do you bring actually value to the population that is living in that specific area if there's no industry, if there's no transport for that energy? So turning it into basically Bitcoin, the backbone of a global value system, verifying that system exists, might actually make perfect sense. And purely economical, it doesn't make lots, like the Bitcoin miners need the cheapest energy possible.
Exactly. It's part of the game theory. I mean,
And it's usually excess energy that otherwise wouldn't be used or And it's yeah.
It's like photons, you know. So I think in hundreds of years ago, scientists, maybe just one scientist was trying to figure out what is light, and then eventually concluded it's actually not like any other form of energy, and I'm going to call it a photon, right? And then that's what powers fiber optic networks today, and we have gigabit Ethernet in our home and stuff like that. Yeah. But basically, it's that transformation of energy, which would normally go nowhere or just be wasted. You can actually turn that into value now. Yeah.
And it's for areas often that otherwise did not have the opportunity to participate in the global value creation.
Right, exactly.
Creating a,
So then, if you look at the big Bitcoin influencers out there, like the Anthony Pomplianos or 100 trillion, these guys are predicting Bitcoin will be like $100,000 or like $250,000 a coin in like 2021 or 2022. Do you buy that?
Do I buy Bitcoin or do I buy that argument?
Do you buy that argument?
Well, first of all, I think we're not doing financial advice here.
No, it's not financial advice at all.
Not do financial.
But so often friends ask me, and I said, if you really understand Bitcoin, and I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I believe there's a lot of other technology things, just to be clear. But I think Bitcoin has a very special place in the global system, and will have a very special place. So I think there's only two ways. There's only two ways. Either it goes to zero because something breaks and the system falls apart and quantum computing comes and encryption gets broken. Who knows what is going on? So either it's going to be zero or it will be multiples of what it is today. Is it going to be $250,000 in 2022? Who knows? But actually, who cares? I think it's the infrastructure of trust on a global level, independent from specific jurisdictions, but allowing collaboration between people and organizations, that will change the world. That creates opportunities, I think, in places where we have, and areas where we haven't even thought about today. And will it reflect in the Bitcoin price itself? Sure, it's a scarce asset. Scarce asset. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Like DeLoreans.
Yes, like DeLoreans. As long as there's so the demand will very likely go up, and so the price will go up. It's very, very likely. Very, very likely.
Very likely.
Apparently collector cars have also had a massive amount of appreciation in dollar value over the last 10, 20 years.
That's not just inflation.
That's a very good question. It's like, where does inflation really happen?
Yeah, exactly. Well, but it is a tangible, very, very tangible, real asset that people understand. Cars.
Yes.
And if there's only, 1,000 DeLoreans in the world, or only 200 of these specific Ferraris in the world, of course they're going to be more valuable, than 10 million Toyotas. Right?
And there's only one of me, but does that mean I'm more valuable? It depends on demand, right? There can be only 200 Ferraris, but if no one wants them, then
it's a question of demand, right? If nobody needs or for whatever reasons can't use a combustion engine car anymore, and you only can put them in museums, I don't know what that does to the price of a collector car. Right. But
so on this topic, because you're German, I really
and American, I have two
and
passports.
American.
Just to be clear.
Oh, okay, all right.
Just to be
Awesome.
clear.
I was actually thinking of trying to get a South Korean passport too, but I think it's going to be too much work. But anyway, so let's see here. In school, what did they teach you guys about the Deutschmark and the hyperinflation that happened, in that era? I don't know. I'm so ignorant. I'm so vastly ignorant. I don't even know exactly when it was. And so if you could just kind of give a high level, like, what do they teach about in school nowadays?
Well, first of all, I'm a little bit older, so I haven't been in school for a while.
Oh, that's true.
Especially not in Germany. But the education of history, I think, at least during my school time, has been a very, very strong focus. Of course, growing up in second part of the 19th century, of the 20th century.
Yeah.
The history, especially Germany, of the first part of the century was extremely important to understand what happened and why does it happen. And inflation, the money policy before the 1930s was one of the key topics. You had the cultural understanding of coming from a society that was focusing very much on strong leadership based on the emperor before that.
Mm-hmm.
So the strong dad, very strong patriarchal society, and that all fell apart after the First World War. When you started to have this democratic system and the social democrats that are trying to bring voting rights to everybody, and people are treated equally, and then you had the communists happening in the Soviet Union at the same time. So there's all this turmoil happening globally. And then in the 20s, basically the U.S. government, the German government at that time, after the Treaty of Versailles, they lost a lot of the resources. And what they realized is like if they print a little bit more money, they can buy more things.
Right.
So, and that worked for about 10 years. I mean, the whole thing took about 10 years from printing more money until the people realized that if they get money in the morning, it's worth less in the evening. So you're trying to start to get out of the paper money into other assets.
Yeah.
And then it's accelerating heavier because people spend even faster and try to get it into things that are
something that'll hold value.
That'll hold
Store
value.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like I think in the 1980s in Argentina, people bought stereo equipment because that was the only thing they could actually get their hand on and that held value versus the local currency. So people try to get out of the moment that people lose trust in the currency, they're trying to get out of it and trying to get into other assets.
Right.
And so that was
apparently, I forgot which call it was. They're all melding together now, but apparently the world reserve currency changes hands about every 80 to 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happens we're living here at a time where about 100 years into the U.S. dollar being the world reserve currency. And so there's these predictions of, you know where I'm going.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, what's going to take the place of the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency? And
any predictions?
I don't think that the U.S. is going to easily give that up.
No.
It's also been called the petrodollar because oil, is an extremely valuable commodity.
Mm-hmm.
Without energy, cities and countries basically collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I know we're getting into heavy topic here.
No, I think up to a degree it's already happening. I mean, most people don't realize it, especially if you live within a specific system, you don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
If you I've been in Davos the last few years, and while the Swiss franc price hasn't changed of the goods there, by now it's 25% more expensive for me to be in Switzerland than it was 3 years ago. So the US dollar versus what you can buy in Switzerland today has gone down by, I would say, like 25 to 30% of the buying power already. And that's in 3 years. But here, well, you might, if you go to Costco, you probably start to see it. If you go to Starbucks, you see that your latte gets more and more expensive.
It's the safety and the dominance of the U.S. dollar in the world that makes people blind. Yeah, especially the U.S. First world. You're not supposed to say first world. I think you're supposed to say developed countries. You're just too cushioned from the economic turmoil of bad policy and bad leadership of other countries that ruins their currency. And so it's like average Americans don't see it, and so.
But we should be feeling it. I mean, even if you look at home prices, right? Something that was once a couple $100,000 selling for $500,000, and that's why we have the housing squeeze going on right now, right?
No. But look, I mean, go to the supermarket and see how much avocados cost now versus 2 years ago,
like
or
$3
tomatoes
for one.
Yeah, so
or even one of those Asian pears. I was like $3.99 for one Asian pear. I think that's just crazy.
I try to explain this to people. It's like if you live in a country, you don't necessarily see it. So if you the Turkish lira has devaluated dramatically versus the US dollar.
Yeah, success.
But if you are in Turkey, the house you lived in, I don't know what is basically within Turkish lira, it's the same price that it was 5 years ago, more or less, maybe a couple percent up or down. But within the Turkish lira, it's the same price, more or less the same price. But for you, looking at it from a US and a US dollar perspective, the house is now 1/3 of the value it was 15 years ago.
Oh, man.
Yeah, our au pair's from Turkey. And she talks about her experiences in Turkey. She says, like she came back from a shopping trip once and she was like, Arry, I bought this coat. It was $50. In Turkey, this would have been at least $300-400 Turkey dollars. It's just not possible for me to obtain this sort of stuff anymore. We can't go shopping anymore because nothing's attainable.
Yeah.
You can't go shopping.
Well, the other way that the economy got wrecked is businesses' jobs.
Yeah.
So businesses going under and then jobs just disappearing.
Yeah.
And then you have a whole bunch of people unemployed.
Yeah.
And
And she's like, I'm a civil engineer. I have a 4-year degree, engineering degree. I can't get a job. She's like, even if you work hard as a country and your people work hard, there's no jobs for us. And she's like, America, you guys still have jobs.
Still,
Yes.
yes. I think there's I don't want to sound too pessimistic now. We're definitely living in times of change.
Do you think you're going to move?
I get that question since I'm here. So how likely is it you're going back to Germany at one point? As well as likely they go to Australia or New Zealand or Singapore or something. Who knows? I mean, we are living in a global environment now. And turning the curve here back to blockchain, the whole legislative environment, it's nearly impossible for a young company to found here in the state of Washington or in other U.S. states right now because just the legal costs are so high, extremely high to have a chance of being compliant. So we have companies that are basically sitting in Singapore, for example, or in Armenia or somewhere, Berlin. So there's Switzerland, there's all kinds of different places now that are making it easier for people to be compliant. It's not like trying to avoid the law, but it's just trying to figure out what the regulations are and following it. And I said we in the U.S., but I'm a U.S. citizen. I feel like it. This is my country. And we have often we sometimes we lose the eye on the ball, I think that's the right idiom we're using. I mean, like when I grew up, telecommunication was a monopoly in Germany. So calling into the US was like the equivalent of $4 a minute or something. I mean, it was extremely expensive. And you could not, you had a choice, like the choice of telephone device in your house was basically like you want a green one or the beige one. So that was it, because a monopoly supplier. US prices were a fraction of that. But if you travel around the world right now, mobile phone bills, unlimited data, it's extremely cheap nearly everywhere except in the US.
Really?
Yes. So the prices we pay here are by now 3-4 times more expensive than you would pay in Germany, Switzerland, probably 10 times as much as in Cambodia, for example, or Thailand or Singapore.
Yeah.
We are paying here multiples of what you would pay for the same kind of service in other countries.
That's disappointing.
That's very disappointing. Hey, T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Oh,
Yeah.
a lot of them.
You travel a lot, and you're also a parent. I don't know. I feel mom guilt when I travel or I'm away from my little ones, especially when it comes to bedtime. I like to smell them, the smell of the little ones as they go to bed. How do you do that? How does that feel? How do you stay close to the family?
Oh, well, first of all, I'm very, very fortunate to have the family. So they're fantastic. A lot of the things are possible because my wife and I have a relationship that allows me to do these things and give her the environment to be there for the kids and me also to go on trips from time to time, but it also goes both ways. So I just came back from Switzerland and she traveled for 2 weeks to take care of her family. So and then have two uninterrupted weeks where I make sure the kids go not only to school, but do their karate classes and go to piano lessons and drive them around. And it's precious. I mean, I love to have the time with them and it's great. And then when I travel, I like to take wherever I can. I take the family with me. So it doesn't work all the
That's
time.
very nice. Yeah.
But I had, like this year, I took my oldest son to Davos. Last year, my oldest daughter was in Davos at a youth camp at the same time. In last year, I was at a conference in Portugal, and my wife and the two younger kids were with me, and we spent some extra time in Portugal. So it's really combining. If you have the flexibility of combining these things, or you make the flexibility, I don't think it's really having things. I think you can arrange a lot of stuff. You can create experiences, a lot of experiences.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, we tried that ourselves, trying to take family with us on trips, to like the Bitcoin blockchain digital assets conferences. But it's I don't know. We've decided that it's too hard. Especially with the little kids that we have.
Very little,
just
though.
Very
little.
difficult.
It's hard. That is
Yeah.
really, really hard. I mean, I've traveled with kids in all ages. I was just looking at some old pictures when our youngest was born. She was like 9 months, and we spent like 2 months in Italy.
Oh.
And it was that worked out okay, but it's not something like getting on a plane and traveling from A to B. That doesn't work. But when they get older, age appropriate opportunities. I mean, my oldest one my oldest daughter is now 17. I mean, I took her to Korea. The two of us were heading over to Korea. I don't know, maybe like 4 years ago. World Computing Conference, I think, and. Again, like you spend time.
That's awesome.
You can trust them that they don't run away during those times. And even my youngest one, I took her to Germany. I had some business things and some other things going on, and then you travel with her over. Had some friends and you family, and so I can go and do like 5 hours of meetings, and she has time with her grandma, for example, right?
Right.
Let's talk about Davos.
Sure.
So this is something that, of course, I've seen in the financial news a ton. You see it in the general news, a ton every year when it comes around. But I guess for the layperson who's not in technology or finance or politics or just not really paying attention to that world, how would you describe what happens at Davos?
So one of the things I had no idea until I went there the first time, there's a whole ecosystem of events that is going around the actual World Economic Forum. So the Davos, by the way, that's the Swiss always say, it's Davos. Davos. It's like a cigar-shaped village, and somewhere in the middle is the conference center. And then there's a street that goes through the whole thing because it's a valley. Like it's in the middle of high mountains all around, one entrance, one exit basically on both sides. And the actual conference center is what you see on TV. That's where the presidents show up or the prime ministers show up. The whole city, it's a small city, like 10,000 people or something. It's very
it's tiny.
Yeah, it's tiny. It's very locked down during that time.
Okay.
And most people walk because you can't really drive anywhere because when the president's limousine goes from A to B, the whole traffic gets shut down and you can't go anywhere. So everybody walks. So you've walked to the street, and so usually basically it's one main road called the promenade, and to go to different places. So you run into the president, like the prime minister, the president of India at one side and the Russian minister for communication on the other side, and you just pass by. Like I met the CEO of the Intercontinental Hotel Group at one. It's like you meet people just because everybody walks around. And why do they walk around? Because the whole promenade, this whole street, is turned into an exhibition center. Or more, to imagine, like there's usually like it's a small city that has clothes shops and bakeries and pizza shops and bookstores and all kinds of things. But for this 1 week, companies come in and take over the actual shop.
What?
So they go in, remove the whole bookstore, put an Accenture decor outside, and now it's the Accenture lounge or the
What?
Salesforce lounge.
Interesting.
Facebook builds a whole pavilion. It's like, this is the Facebook pavilion. They do demos, they do networking, you have coffee, and they do events in those spaces. So consulting companies like do morning discussion at 7 o'clock in the morning with, the CEOs of Coca-Cola, Unilever, and Black & Decker, and discussing stakeholder in the modern society. Well, how do we have to think about it? Not only shareholders, but so yesterday, how do we think about the responsibility and for the planet and for our employees and for society, and have those? And it starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, and basically the last events end up 2-3 in the morning.
Wow.
So you mentioned an organization that most people probably are completely unaware of, because all the name brand companies you named off, household names, everybody knows them. But this World Economic Forum, like, what is actually the World Economic Forum? I guess is it headquartered in Davos? Is the reason why it's there?
No, it's in Switzerland. So
it's in Switzerland,
it's a gentleman, Klaus Schwab, who basically founded this in about 50 years ago. It was the 50 years, and said, well, it would be good to think about world problems and just try to figure out, like, when do we have people time to actually think about what's going on in the world and share ideas between scientists, artists, social impact people, and bring them all together with people that actually make decisions and have the budget to actually make real decisions. So he created this World Economic Forum as an organization that is doing research, very much on these days it's called around sustainability goals,
Right.
that are quite a diverse range of topics now, really looking at all the key challenges I think humanity faces. And the event that ended up in Davos over the years is really focusing on those areas. So we have access at the same time, to the same place, to Nobel Prize winners, to climate researchers. So I mean, they built like these climate Arctic tents up there on the mountain, and I've met the lady who's running this now for the 3 years in a row, and really educating people of what's happening, what are the real numbers look like. You have a lot of journalists there that have unprecedented access, I think, as well. It's accelerating conversations enormously. So of course, there's all these things as it's the global elite, blah blah blah. But at the end, I mean, who can make an impact? People can make decisions and for themselves. And if you have good information, usually you have a chance of making better decisions.
Interesting. How long have you been going now?
This was my third year.
Third year? Okay.
Yeah.
And do you see yourself continuing to attend?
I think I came back this year, and every year was more better because you know what you're doing and where to go, and because there's so many things happening at the same time. Like for that week, my schedule is like every hour I could be at 3 or 4 different places, and it's all interesting. I mean, it's all like super interesting things.
It's ultimate FOMO.
Yes, it is. Yes, that's a good one. That's a good one.
And so another way to describe it might be like Burning Man, except it's for a different level.
I mean, I have to quote my son. My son called it Disneyland for MBAs, but and there's probably something on that as well. But no, it's interesting. I came home this year and I was like, okay, I'm looking at my schedule for the year. Are there really other events I need to go to globally? And very few things. I think you do this. You spent this 1 week there. There was another conference a week before that was focusing on crypto mostly, and one valley over in St. Moritz. But between those 2 events, I have to say, it was really meet nearly everybody you want to meet and talk to, and catching up. And it was...
The one, I guess, little media story that got covered that I happened to catch is the story of all the private jets. So where do you keep your private jet, and how often do you take it out?
Just for the record, no, I do. My DeLorean doesn't fly.
It travels through time, but it doesn't fly.
Darn.
As I said, I like the blockchain space, but a lot of the people I spend most of my time with have no technology background and definitely no blockchain background. So the questions they asked were over and over the same thing. So I got Phil Klein, who had organized TEDx many years ago, and we know is a good writer. So we joined up in 2018 and basically utilized all the speeches I had given, the transcripts I had created for Rutgers University. I had created a Coursera class on new technologies and the impact on business. So we took all of that content and basically turned it into a readable book that then the Gary Shapiro, who's organizing CES every year, so he's the head of CES, highlighted in his book club in 2019 and said, that's the one book for around blockchain and how it's changing the world you have to read, called The Trust Technology. We are actually looking at it right now because, as you said, everything is changing so fast. So what do we do with the second edition? What are the things that need to be updated? Stable coins, of course, we mentioned briefly, but a year later, things have changed a lot.
Quite a bit.
So there's definitely an update. I would say it's still a really good book as far as I'm hearing to read, but it could add some topics that I think we should add, and some re-editing probably as well. Because the first time we just try to get it done as quickly as possible and get the content in the hand of people. So, but
Right,
yes,
right.
so
I'm actually rereading right now Inventing Bitcoin. I forget. I don't know. I think it's Pritzker. Janos Pritzker, I want to say, is the author's name. But reading it the second time through, much easier, much faster. First time through, it was pretty tedious, you know, because he basically goes through the entire thought process of figuring out all the features of inventing, you know, the Bitcoin blockchain. And so it takes, I mean, I have a technical background, and it still took a little bit to absorb it. Second time around, though, it's like, woo, 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 woo.
there is a hurdle to overcome. I think when Virgilio Lizardo who's now at Gate.io, when I met him in Shenzhen, he said, okay, so I give you like the couple of hours of what it is, but before I talk to you again, you have to read the Satoshi white paper first. You have to make sure you have it fully understood, and then we keep talking. So I said,
Right, exactly. Yeah. So you did mention stablecoins for a second there. So I mean, do you have a I don't know? Do you have a what's the right word?
Favorite stable coin?
No, not like that. Like, do you have a nuanced kind of opinion of stable coins then versus now, and maybe conjecturing into the future?
I mean, in 2018, when we wrote the book originally, stablecoins were just at an infancy. I mean, one of the projects I'm following for a while is the MakerDAO project. So we mentioned that in the book. We said, this is what it is, but it was well before Libra, for example. So well before that. I mean, I met Dante in Davos, of course. So this year, so we had a good conversation from the Libra Association, and it really helps to understand things.
Right.
When you have a chance to not only read the couple of paragraphs from time to time in the news, but you really.
I mean, do you think that
understand,
the stable coins will be the, I guess, gateway drug into Bitcoin?
I think you will have some kind of monetary unit where people are familiar with, and if it has a dollar sign attached to it or a Thai baht sign or whatever it is on the front end, it doesn't really matter as long as people think they're living in a world they understand, and then it's stable, right? I mean, at the end, what kind of technology is underlying, they don't really care. Most people don't really care.
I mean, most people don't know how the internet works. I mean, they know that the smartphone responds quickly. They can type on it. They can send email, text messages, talk on it, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, who really knows what the difference between TCP and UDP is?
No.
You know, it's like no one.
And if you make it usable, I mean, the iPhone was not the first smartphone, but it was the easiest to use. And same like in China, when WeChat started, WeChat Pay, you scan somebody else's QR code, okay, and then you're done. It's easy. Who cares what kind of database is in the back end or. And it looks like Chinese RMB on the front end, but if it's actually a private entries in a database, who cares?
Exactly.
I mean, So
I think Arry makes that argument too about infrastructure like that, like kind of like enterprise infrastructure, which is, you know, you never cared before what kind of database, you know, if it was SQL database, what kind of database that enterprise ran. So why do you care now if it's going to be a blockchain behind the scenes, public or private or open source or, you know, like, what does it matter?
It shouldn't matter.
No, I think you're right. My identity gets managed easier. I can buy things easier. Service goes quicker. Perfect. Great. Or have access to things I wouldn't have access to, like the Indonesian farmers that cannot buy insurance, and because they only have, they can't even prove that they have their properties theirs and what the things look like, and now they can because they have access to a financial system that we take for granted, but in a large part of the world is not.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's where we'll see a lot of the innovation happening.
Totally agree.
And finally, I think on the positive note, I mean, the regulators are seeing it. I think, Arry, you guys doing a great job here in the state of Washington. I mean, I know you. I'm one of the harsher critics because it's so difficult. I think in this state, it has been really, really hard. And I think thanks attorneys, it doesn't really help if a startup has to pay $750,000 in legal fees just to have a chance of being compliant.
That's just not cool.
It's just not right.
No.
If the same thing costs you $30,000 in Singapore.
Right.
I mean, before I came here today, I was on the phone with legislators from New Jersey, and they are really looking at how they do it right, how they can create an environment and an infrastructure. The commission is led by a physicist, somebody who actually understands science. It's really interesting to have that conversation. And so there's definitely people who understand it, and people want to do the right thing for their communities. They want to protect people, which is all goodness, but
Right.
it's sometimes I think their interests might be more on the legal side and on the fee side than necessarily on creating economic opportunities for the population.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you working on? I guess what are you working on that you would like to share with folks? These days it's early 2020, and while we're on the topic of Bitcoin for a little bit here, I'll go ahead and share the price of Bitcoin. So we're $8,692 on February 27th, Thursday. But as far as like what you're working on, what you're excited about, what do you have going on?
Well, I mean, of course, I'm very excited about our consulting business. I haven't mentioned it. It's called EdgeTech. It's existing for 10 years. I founded it. It's helping people to, especially on the business side, to understand what technology can do for them. We have a great team with great consultants that are working globally with leaders in their field and helping them to be more successful in their space with their customers. So that's one area. But I think in the blockchain and Bitcoin space, I think we see phenomenal entrepreneurial spirits and ideas on a global scale, and being able to connect them with customers, clients around the world makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've been on the advisory board of a bunch of different companies. I'm very proud to work with CoinStats, the second largest crypto tracker, for nearly 2 years, just helping our traditional friends to understand the opportunities and unlocking it for them. As you mentioned, like I'm an angel investor here in the Pacific Northwest. The Alliance of Angel, Bill Gates' father.
I like that group. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, Bill Gates' father founded it with Dan Rosen in 1997. It's probably one of the oldest ones and one of the largest U.S. angel groups, with the goal of helping entrepreneurs to grow. And some of us have founded a group where we're basically focusing exactly on the blockchain space. It's a club. Just to be very clear for all the financial regulators, there's no fund. It's really just all accredited investors. Nearly all of them, I think, are also members of the AOA, that are looking at the blockchain space and said, okay, what can we learn? How can we educate each other? How can we see opportunities and evaluate opportunities based on the backgrounds each of us brings to the table?
Right.
And after we make a decision to supporting a team, how can we help the team to grow as efficiently and as effectively as possible, both financially, with financial resources, but at least as important, or maybe more important, is contacts and ideas.
Yeah. So as far as activities in Washington State, like I think you're involved with Blockcelerate. So what's going on with them?
Yeah, that's one of the great things, I think, in Washington State. We have a lot of technology innovation happening over the years, but people, by the way, outside of Washington State don't necessarily know that we have Microsoft and Amazon and Starbucks and even Boeing coming at the cloud capital of the world, maybe even the AI capital of the world.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And like one of the companies here is like Kate Mittelsmacher and Sam Yilmaz was one of the original Bit Angels, founded Blockcelerate a couple of years ago, and really trying to open up the blockchain investment opportunities, but also for entrepreneurs and helping them to get to the next level. And I've been glad to be part of their ecosystem and help and support the Block
So
Accelerate
you're
folks.
advising, investing, both?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Yeah,
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, she's very well spoken. I enjoyed that one investment meeting we went to. Yeah.
And between Block Accelerate, Codex 3, we're doing a lot of deal sharing, and it's really a local community that is strong, but it's also the integration in the global community, and that makes things actually work quite well.
Yes, totally agree.
Can I see the book?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's the. Oops. Here we go.
The Trust Technology: How Blockchain is Changing Your World. Mark Mueller Eberstein and Phil Klein. Awesome. Do we have a copy of this, Sarah?
I have a whole list of books on my Amazon to buy list, but I haven't been able to read for a while, and I have a pile of books growing of books I'm supposed to read.
So you get in line and ask for the Audible book, because I have a long list of people that are asking for that. So maybe I'll do that this summer.
Audible
I'll
book.
update we'll do a second edition, and then we turn it into an Audible
easier.
book. As long as people can stand the German accent, then who knows?
Great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
I'm still in Davos right now in my brain.
Just think about the private jets.
No.
No, but there is on the blockchain space. There's so many blockchain events happening in Davos in parallel. So we had, for example, there's a group called Global Dignity. Sir Richard Branson, Desmond Tutu, they're all on the advisory board of helping students to globally to understand what dignity, human rights, and actually means for them, and what's possible for them. And somebody sponsored sponsored an event for them, event venue for them. So last minute they needed some places, and my group, made sure that they had a place to sleep. So we organized it for them, and they joined us, and we were able to give back to the community and allow those kind of things. Yeah. So we had the Global Dignity Project.
That's awesome.
We supported that this year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, so thank you for coming in. Really appreciate your time. Got something special for you right here.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Arry. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Go ahead and open it. And
Open it.
You might have a clue if you've been listening to the podcast about what it is, but always fun to do the grand opening on the show.
It's a special agro check, $5 billion.
It's an actual $5 billion bill.
You are
from
now a billionaire.
Zimbabwe. I'm a billionaire from Zimbabwe. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very
That is
much.
a
Now,
real note that has been circulated, you know, and so I love the ethos of Plan B on Twitter. 100 trillion USD stock to flow model of Bitcoin. But that's where I got the idea to jump on eBay and pick up a whole bunch of those notes. But you're a billionaire.
So now I'm a club of the billionaires. So now if Bloomberg and I are talking about both billionaires, I met Charles Simoni yesterday. The billionaire was in space, so
Nice.
I can join the club now. I'm a
Yes.
Zimbabwe billionaire.
Yes,
Ah.
exactly.
Officially.
Okay, instead of being a poor professor and teacher. Okay, thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, totally. Let me
Really appreciate it.
If you don't mind, let me get a photo.
Oh no, absolutely. Here we go.
What happens when inflation goes awry?
Well, there's that one person, Parker Lewis, very prominent in at least Twitterville, where I hang out. He has a blog that he started called Gradually and Then Suddenly, and that's a perfect 3-word description about what happens with currencies and fiat money and hyperinflation as well. All of a sudden, you think things are going well, and then you need a wheelbarrow to carry all the paper notes to the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread.
Yep.
Crazy.
No, I think that's if you look at history, if you look, people, I think Bill Gates actually even said it as well. It's like if you think about people overestimate what's happening in the short term and they underestimate what happens in the long term. So that's why I said when you asked me about the Bitcoin price, who cares where it is in 6 months? But I think what really important is where is the Bitcoin and blockchain ecosystem in 6 years.
Yes, true.
I've
True.
totally flipped also on the price, the note about the price, which is I don't worry as much when it goes down anymore. I worry more when it goes up because I'm like, oh man, what kind of questions am I going to start to get from people who know me and know that I'm in this? And, it's like, where's it going to go? But the thing is, like, when it goes down, I'm more calm now because I'm so comfortable with the fundamentals. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark Mueller Eberstein, for joining us on Windshield Time. And thanks to our listeners out there. Quick note to say thank you to our sponsor, the WTIA, the Washington Technology Industry Association.
Tongue twister. Industry Association.
Thanks to our sponsor, the WTIA, the Washington Technology Industry Association, representing over 1,100 technology companies in the Pacific Northwest. And again, thanks so much. I learned so much. My brain is a little bit like swirling right now as I sit here from this conversation, but it was really, really insightful. Thank you so much. And to our listeners out there, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share. Thank you.
Be
Together
nice,
we
y'all.
rise.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Bye.
But yeah, it's like
Mhm.
some podcasts I've listened to,
Yeah.
it sounds like they're in a bathroom.
Yes. Yeah.
Those are the worst.
Maze in the closet. Yes. Oh yeah.
All right. Welcome to Windshield Time, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is non-technical, fun, informative way to learn about money, Bitcoin, blockchains, crypto, and digital assets for busy parents and working folks who are curious about these new technologies. Day, Arry, and their guests talk about these evolutionary systems of money and what they do, y'all. Because what part of your life does money not touch? This podcast is not financial advice, and your reactions are your total and complete responsibility, y'all. Now, thanks again and enjoy the show.